In the opening scene, there's an announcement that Viserys Targaryen, the first one, not the other one, is announced as the heir of the Iron Throne, and the narrator refers to him as her father. Then we get some text exposition saying that this story was 172 years before Daenerys' birth and the original story of Game of Thrones. Also, it's definitely before the extinction of dragons because hell yeah, we're back in King's Landing and on Dragonback, baby. Since this is a prequel series, we're gonna need some new main characters. And look, there she comes down on the Dragonback. Did you like Daenerys but weren't a fan of how her story gave way to be one about madness? Or maybe you preferred Arya Stark's narrative about being unsatisfied with the status quo and being forced into gender roles? Well, look no further because Princess Rhaenyra is exactly what you're looking for. Her and the homie head off to the Red Keep and God, it feels good to be back. Once they arrive, Princess Rhaenyra meets up with her mother, the very pregnant queen. Remember that thing I just said about Arya? Well, yeah, Rhaenyra tells her mom that she'd rather be a dragon-riding knight than pregnant, and I think that goes without saying, but whatever. At the small council meeting, Lord Valerian, who I assume to be master of ships, tells the king about some dude named the Crab Feeder who's encroaching on their territory. But the king doesn't seem bothered by it because he's only killing pirates. He's also feeding them to the crabs. That's where he got the name. The council then talks about the king's brother and fellow small council member Daemon, who is absent because he's training the City Watch. Valerian's pissed off that nobody's listening about this crab guy, but the hand of the king tells him to shut up, and then he does. Finally, the council discusses a tournament to celebrate the birth of the queen's baby. The king strongly believes it's going to be a male so that he has a suitable heir, as his only child now is a female. Rhaenyra goes to the Iron Throne, where her uncle, the aforementioned Daemon, is sitting on it and talking about how it's going to be his chair, and the jousting tournament is to celebrate him, which is sketchy. Also, he's Doctor Who. After that conversation, Rhaenyra and her friend Alicent are talking about the imminent baby and where it will leave her, and she again expresses that she does not want the throne or any responsibilities besides flying around on a dragon and having a good time. Elsewhere, King Viserys got cut by sitting on a chair made of swords, who would have thought, and it got infected. That's pretty bad news as there won't be antibiotics for another millennia, so they decide to cauterize it. Then he goes to his wife who's in the tub to talk about the baby and how he's absolutely positively sure that it'll be a son, and it'll be the king. I'm telling you, this baby is gonna be someone important because they will not stop talking about it. Prince Daemon, looking nefarious as anyone can possibly look, takes his city guard and does a massive raid and slaughter on anyone who is associated with crime or something. I don't know. They kill a bunch of people who are apparently criminals. I don't know how they got that information. It's pretty unclear. Otto Hightower, Hand of the King, is very mad at this unprovoked massacre despite the fact that the people were all allegedly criminals, as it's not a very civilized way to handle the issue one way or the other. Lord Valerian has Daemon's back on this matter. The king tells Daemon to cut that shit out, but that's about it. The tournament things happen and some dudes run at each other with sticks on horseback. Exhilarating sport. Fun for the whole family. Daemon shows up in armor that's definitely not evil and chooses someone to duel, and he picks the Hand's son. He then trips the other guy's horse, which is certainly against the rules, but it was probably an accident, I bet. During the event, King Viserys gets the message that the birth of the child is not going very well at all. No matter what they do, the birth is not happening, so the Maester gives him the impossible choice: save the baby with a medieval C-section or lose them both. He makes the call to save the baby without telling his wife or any form of sedation, so they just hold her down and do it. She of course bleeds out, but the baby is a son. Meanwhile, at the tournament, some dude salty that he lost decides to do the old-timey version of sending a hateful Xbox message and smashes the other guy's head with a mace. Then all the other knights start to brutalize each other, for fun presumably, because we learn that this is a time of peace and very few of these men have ever fought a real battle. After that, Daemon faces the only knight there that has seen a real battle and gets smoked. Then he also gets angry and tries to continue it in a contest of arms and gets whooped a second time. Not long after, we're on a cliff and we see a funeral pyre for the queen and the baby, who did not survive despite the effort on the king's part. Then they use a dragon to burn it, which is probably some Targaryen culture thing. After the funeral at the small council, Otto brings up that a new heir is needed, just in case. Lord Valerian brings up that they have had and continue to have an heir in Daemon. Otto, who very clearly hates Daemon and everything Daemon is about, continues to argue, making the argument that Rhaenyra has more of a claim to the throne than Daemon ever did. Then there's a big debate about whether or not a girl should be allowed to sit the Iron Throne. The king does not want to have this conversation because he is grieving, obviously. Otto calls for his daughter, Rhaenyra's best friend, to go comfort the king in his time of sorrow. She does, and she brings up the loss of her own mother and offers him condolences. Meanwhile, Daemon is at a brothel and throwing a fucking rager because he is now the clear heir due to, being male, and seems to be having a grand old time with a lot of nudity that I had to avoid to fit this scene in this video. News of this party gets to Otto, who delivers the information to the king, specifically the fact that Daemon referred to his late nephew as the heir for a day. The king calls Daemon to confront him about this, and unable to lie, Daemon claims that it's his way of mourning. King Viserys does not buy that bullshit and announces that he's picking a new heir and exiles Daemon from King's Landing. In the crypt or basement thing where the big old skull of Balerion the Black Dread is, King Viserys talks to Rhaenyra about a bunch of important royal stuff, since she will now be named the heir. The most important information exchanged is that Aegon Targaryen had a very vivid dream of the death of man coming from the north, which is a prophecy passed from king to heir for generations, which they call the Song of Ice and Fire. Very coy, George. There's some big ceremony thing and everyone swears fealty to Rhaenyra and Daemon flies off on his dragon, probably scheming.